Welcome to Own the Season podcast. We will talk to industry insiders along with outdoor enthusiasts to help you own your season. Now let's join hosts Art and Michelle Helen with Brad Jones. Own the Season podcast is brought to you by The Hunter's Vault. Cool, protect, and age your harvest with great results. Full size but yet portable. The Hunter's Vault. Find out more at thehuntersvault.com.
Hello and welcome to Own the Season podcast. I'm Michelle Helen, along with Art Helen and Brad Jones. And today's special guest is Brian Keister with Rugged Altitude. Hey, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you guys?
Fantastic.
You guys ready for your trip?
It's creeping up. It's like starting to feel real, I think. You know, you plan it so far in advance and it seems like it's forever. And then all of a sudden it's like 2 weeks from today.
Yeah, and Art, I never got to ask you, is this your guys' first time going out to Africa?
Yes.
It is?
Yep. So we're going to be there. And
that's exciting.
Yeah, I don't know. Everybody says that we're going to be going back, and I'm like, right now, I mean, everybody usually goes back, but right now I don't have that plan. I got so many other things that I want to hunt that, Africa is not in the plans to go back to often, if ever again, and that plan might change down the road, but right now, I don't know.
Just a bucket list hunt?
Yeah, I mean, I got, just like you, Brad, I mean, I got another elk I'd like to go shoot. I'd like to shoot someday, go hopefully hunt a grizzly bear and shoot a bull moose. And, I got a million things on that list to do, and go to New Zealand and shoot a red stag. And there's all kinds of things. And only problem is that, there's a list of critters that I'd like to hunt a mile long, and pocketbook and is only so deep. And as I get older, time is also not on my side anymore. It's you run out of time and you run out of money before you run out of critters that you actually want to go hunt. So
Isn't that the truth?
It really is. Yeah. So, but anyway, we're let's talk about Rugged Altitude. We had a podcast last week that we did on technology, and I got a little fired up about a few things here and there, but as we talked about technology, one of the big things that we came up with and that we talked about was drones, and how that technology has really changed recovery and, different things. And people have a lot of false information and false beliefs when it comes to these drones. And you have a drone business. That's what you do. So we kind of want to, take a deeper dive into that and, really get the inside scoop from you on these drones and everything that's accompanies them, and how it really works.
Yeah, absolutely. Willing to share what I know and everything I kind of come across. There's obviously some legalities around the whole drone thing with the DNR and everything. So I like to think the majority of us are using the drones in the right way. But obviously there's going to be some bad actors that I'm sure, everybody has the same concern out there. So, but the bad actors, you'll never be able to prevent them, from doing illegal things. If they want to do illegal stuff, they're going to find a way to do it. So.
Yeah. So what types of services do you offer?
Yeah, so we offer quite a bit different services. So I guess a little about me first, just to kind of give everybody a background. So, I grew up, hunting. I remember my first, hunting experience was with my dad, and actually it was with my sister and brother as well. So my mom used to work late at night. So my dad, when he wanted to try to get out hunting, he had to take all of us kids. So, back in those days, you had, for recovery purposes, you had the string kind of tied to your arrow, right? So when you shot, you followed that string to the deer. So I I remember growing up, using that kind of stuff with my dad. And then after that, I kind of just got hooked onto hunting. I remember shooting my first deer when I was about 12 years old, and being up in that tree stand and your knees just start knocking after you release that arrow, even when the animal's coming in, like you're already, that adrenaline rush, right? It's going. So that kind of got me hooked onto it. But, obviously growing up, and then, you still hunt. But as you get older, your focus kind of changes a little bit. And I don't go out there just to shoot animals anymore. It's a different view, with a faith background and stuff like that. So I kind of look at it from a different lens now as I get older. So I also work in telecommunications. So that was part of another reason why I got into drones. There's a lot of uses for drones. Obviously, deer recovery is just one of those things. But so when you talk about services that I offer, obviously deer recovery is one of the big ones. But we also do like property mapping. Basically, we love to do that in the fall and early spring when we can get out there, fly a property where there's no leaves on the trees, and we can take images facing straight down and get the customers up-to-date imagery on their properties. And then from there, we can compile a map. It's just like Google Earth, but this is up-to-date. This is very crystal clear. I have maps that you can actually see, like deer trails running through the property and everything. So we like to do that kind of stuff for customers as well. And then I also do offer LiDAR services as well, which, there's a lot of data behind LiDAR. You can see some really cool things. So those are just a few of the services that we offer at Rugged Altitude, but the main one is definitely deer recoveries. And I feel like last year we definitely took leaps and bounds step forward compared to like everybody else that's around us. Last year we did just over 150 deer recoveries.
Oh,
that seems like a lot.
So what kind of federal and state laws do you need to follow with your drone?
So the main ones that we have to follow, obviously we can fly up to 400 feet above ground level. So that one is hard for some people to grasp when I show up and tell them, hey, we can only fly 400 feet above ground, So we always try to get a vantage point, that works well for us and for the hunter. Obviously property lines, we got to be, make sure we're on their property, or if we are going to be using somebody else's property, try to get permission from them to fly or launch from their properties. That is one of the big ones. Another one that customers are a little baffled by too is visual line of sight. We have to maintain visual line of sight with the drone. The biggest thing is the FAA, they always look at safety first. So we can't just be flying our drones, up in the sky, and that's part of the reason we need to go to that 400 feet or lower. We don't want to go above it. We don't want a manned aircraft running into our drone and then they crash into it, and then, it becomes a big thing, right? So we obviously don't want that. So it's all about safety. So maintaining visual line of sight is a big one. And, with that also comes, like, if we don't have visual line of sight with the drone, we will end up losing reception between the drone and the controller anyways. So it's really best for us to maintain visual line of sight with that drone. There's obviously waivers we can get along with that as well. But for the most part, we all just stick within, the 400 feet above ground level and then maintaining visual line of sight. You also have to be aware of, like, if there's TFRs, which is temporary flight restrictions, you have to be aware of that because those, you cannot fly within those zones. There's usually not a lot of those in Wisconsin, so it's nothing to be too worried about. There's applications out there that we use to identify that kind of stuff. So those are the big ones, and obviously just being mindful of airports. But again, where we're at, we don't have a ton of those. I know Mineral Point is one of those that we got to be mindful of because when you get so close to that, you actually can't fly near that airport. But once you get further away from the airport, you actually can. They have ceilings that you can fly up to. So once you get to the outer edge of it, you can go up to 400 feet. But once you start getting closer to that ceiling kind of goes lower, right? So then it goes from like 300 feet down to 200, down to 100, and then 0. So there are times where you can maybe get a waiver, maybe fly in those areas as well. But it is a very slow process to get those waivers.
Are there licensing involved that you need to have?
There is to do it commercially, yes. So you do have to get a Part 107 license, which I do have. And then you have to take reoccurrent training every 2 years to stay on top of any new regulations that might have come out. You just have to be informed of what they are. So that was the biggest thing. But yeah, it can be a process. If anybody's looking to get into it, I would definitely, take the time, read the material, understand airspace. But once you understand it, it's really not that bad to get the license.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at it more than once because of what we do and thought, hey, you know what, this would be really cool to, just go to Walmart and buy myself a drone and, fly it over for the, for some really cool effects for the TV show. And also back years ago when I was in the real estate business and appraisal stuff, that was like, hey, this would be cool for that too. Well, then as I started looking into it, and there's a lot of people out there that do it because they say, well, yeah, but my drone is really small, because I think there's like a weight restriction or if it's so small or whatever, but that doesn't matter when it comes to commercial. And so when I started finding that out, I was like, yeah, I don't have the time, number one, to go through all this schooling and everything else and to try to do this myself, and then, the cost and the drones. And so instead we just hooked up with you because, I knew we could do it legally and have everything taken care of because it's one of the last things, we need when we're trying to do the TV show is all of a sudden they say, hey, you know what, I need to see, your license for this, and, do you have your commercial stuff to be able to put this out there on the TV show? And I'd be, yeah, no, but this is the guy who does our work for us. And, so with that being said, I think that's part of your other than just deer recovery is, you do some of the commercial stuff, or I'm sure if somebody contacted you for, some real estate things or any type of commercial drone flying, that you do that too, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. It's just not our main focus, but yeah, we definitely help people out wherever we can. We've flown some solar fields for Reliant Energy. We've done some real estate stuff. So yeah, we're willing to help wherever we can. So if you guys have, or anybody listening, if you guys have drone needs, by all means, reach out. But to your point, Art, there are a lot of folks out there that they don't know the drone rules and regulations. Like you can just go to a Best Buy, you can buy a drone, which, right or indifferent, right? It's one of those things where, if you don't know the rules and regulations, well, you could be asking for some serious trouble with the police and everybody else that might get involved. The FAA has been cracking down on people for this kind of stuff, and there's real estate agents out there too. They're supposed to have, a Part 107 license because technically that is commercial. Mm-hmm. If you're taking videos or photography, anything with a property, that is commercialized. And it really comes down to intent of what you plan on doing with that footage or video. If again, you're using that image or video for that property, right? You're posting that property as commercial. It's part of your business. So your intent is to sell something with that footage. So that falls underneath Part 107.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's not, kind of not really off subject, but it's people need to look at the laws and the rules and how some places are interpreting them, because I have a friend that tried to get into Canada this year. He's been going to Canada for 20 years and he is not a guide. Okay, what he does is he helps an outfitter friend of his. He helps that person by getting hunters. So because this gentleman does a lot of seminars, a lot of things all over, he has that following. So then he goes on his social media, he goes on all these things, and he says, hey, you know what, this outfitter is looking for hunters, he has hunt openings, etc. I'll be up there this week to hunt with you, and can help do this and that, right? And this year when he got to the border, they said, you need to have a work permit to be here in Canada. And he says, but I'm not a guide. And they said, no, but looking at your footage and what you've posted, because you actually help go back to the baits and you help recover some of these, even if they're your friends, because you've posted this, we're not letting you. So they banned him from Canada for 1 year this year.
Wow.
Yeah. So next year he has to get a work permit to go in. We've had to do that when we go in and film the TV shows. You know, if we go to different places, one of our team members is going on a moose hunt this year. He had to buy a work permit to film this moose hunt in Alaska. When we go on the Mississippi River, here's another one that a lot of people don't realize. When we go on the Mississippi River duck hunting, because we are filming it for the TV show, we have to get a permit to be able to film.
Now, that changed a little bit a couple of years ago. Well, there was 1 year where they got rid of it because there was a lawsuit where some indie film producer took issue with the requirement for the permits, and so then they kind of put a hold on that, and then now it's back. But they did what I think they should have done a long time ago, which I think made sense there, in that they looked at, like, what's your impact on the refuge. You know, like, we're not going in there with, like, giant trucks and a crew of 50 people that are trampling around with big, you know, booms and all this stuff that's, you know, trampling things and causing interruption of the wildlife and all of these things. So it was, they kind of asked, you know, a lot of questions around things like that. And then the permitting is structured where it's not kind of a one size fits all. But yeah, you know, even state parks, you know, wedding photographers, senior picture photographers, they need to have a permit to be taking photos in those parks.
And a lot of people don't realize that, because I do so much photo work, and it's for commercial purposes. But if you are making a profit off of that, like here in Southwest Wisconsin, for example, like Governor Dodge State Park, Devil's Lake State Park, actually any state park in Wisconsin, if you go in there to take pictures, if you're taking senior photos, wedding photos, family photos, anything like that, and are paying, if it's not a family member, if you are paying for those photos, that photographer has to have a permit, and it's $50 per year per park. So if you're only in Governor Dodge,
which I don't agree with that part.
If you're only in Governor Dodge, it's $50. But if you're in Governor Dodge, Devil's Lake, Yellowstone, all these others, it's $50 per park that you're taking those pictures in. And, you know, a lot of people do not understand that. They don't realize that.
Well, I think what that is, too, is you get everybody's a photographer now because they've got a digital camera that has all these settings, you know, and they're maybe more affordable. So all of a sudden, everybody's a photographer and doing it for cheap, you know, too, right? And I think then they're making some money. They're doing it as a side gig, you know, maybe in those cases. And they're just like really and truly not like looking at it as a full on business and not doing their due diligence and looking to see if there's anything that, you know, that they should consider with it. Some probably know and are sneaking in and hoping that they don't get caught. But I think you've seen people get caught.
Oh yeah, I've seen people get caught.
the warden or park ranger asking for the chip, the card out of the camera, and then watching the photographer try to explain that to the client.
Right. And
now that they were in there and they didn't have the permit that they should have had as a professional, and now there goes your photos that I just took.
And they'll tell them you need to come to the office and pay for your permit, and I'll give you back your chip. Otherwise, you're not getting it back. And at that point in time, the people start arguments and get upset with it. It's no different than probably with the drones. They go in and they buy a drone at Best Buy or Walmart or wherever they buy this drone. They haven't read the regulations, and they get pinched for it, and then it's not their fault. Well, I didn't know that. Well, it's you need to know that as the professional, is what you are doing. That is on you. That is not on the park. That is not on the FAA. That's not on anybody else but yourself. So you need to know those regulations, and that's why, one of the big things after I looked at it again, why we contacted you and said, hey, Brian, you know what? Is there some way that we can start doing some things? Because I just, I'm not going to go through all that stuff, and you already have. And so it's easier. I don't want to say it might be easier. It's easier to pay you than for me to go out and buy a drone, figure out how to run the drone, get insurance and everything else, and work with somebody who knows what's going on as a professional. And that's one of the other reasons we've looked and do stuff with you, because you're professional. You've done everything right, and you have all that stuff. And I've talked to people where you've actually gone out and, found their deer. And, that's kind of, back onto that. Explain those drones, because like the other day we flew a drone that was completely different than your recovery drone. So you've got, how many drones, what do you want to add, and kind of explain the difference in these drones and what they do.
Yeah, and just to back up real quick, too, because I know, Brad, you were asking about, like, legalities, at the state or federal level, too, and just kind of piggybacking off what you guys were just saying, about the state parks, because we got married out in South Dakota, the Black Hills, and our wedding photographer, she needed a permit, just to take our photos out there and stuff. But one of the big things, and I get usually called out to Governor Dodge at least once, maybe twice a year, and people don't realize, like, you need a permit, to fly out there. The weird thing is, like, there is, some workarounds. Like, you can launch your drone, outside of the state park and then fly your drone over the state park. So there are things like that. You just can't launch your drone from the state park land, and you can't land it. So
if
you
you're
can launch
within
outside of it,
so if your line of sight allows you to do that from the outside, you could do that.
Yep.
That's crazy.
Yep.
Well, I mean, before we get back to this other and all your other drones, we go out west quite a bit. Our daughters live out there. And when we get into like Rocky Mountain
the national
Park
parks is
and all
another
these
story.
Others, they're shut down completely. You can't fly a drone in any national park at all.
Yeah.
We've seen
some
them,
of those,
but they try. People
they
try.
do have regulations where they do control the airspace above them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you know how that all came about is because in Yellowstone National Park, and we found this out because I was like, why can't they fly drones out here? In Yellowstone National Park, it was probably, I don't know, it might be 10 years ago now, some guy had a drone and he was flying it over one of the, not a geyser, but one of the hot springs. And it's one of the really pretty different colored ones.
Like, I don't know if it was Prism or,
it was Prism. And he was flying it over Prism and crashed it into the hot spring. Well, this thing disappeared in the hot spring. There's no way to get it back. Well, they don't know what the effects of those lithium batteries, everything else, all the electronics are going to have on those springs and what it's going to do. And so they just said, you know what, just to avoid all these problems and people crashing these into things that they shouldn't be crashed into within a national park, we're done. And they just shut down all the parks and said, you're not flying them at all. So
I think too, that's, knowing what we see with people, tourists, and their lack of respect for wild animals, getting too close and getting tossed by fluffy cows and trying to take selfies with wild animals. That's probably just pretty smart all around, because there's people, and I just saw a post not too long ago. I don't know if it was some kind of horse sanctuary or what it was. It was a horse park, for lack of a better word, of some kind, where maybe they had like wild horses or Mustangs, I don't know. And somebody had been flying a drone and got a little too close. I don't know that they were like in the horse's face, but close enough that it changed the animal's behavior. And so, the post was, it wasn't like saying that, you can't fly a drone here or drones are bad. But, if you start to notice that the animal's behavior changes, then you're too close. You should back up and give it some space. I could see where, in the national parks, just seeing what we see of humans, that they would probably be in the faces of the animals too. And,
right.
100%
they would. And now off of that, now I got to jump in with something else before we get to the next.
Oh, what's that?
And Brian will probably laugh about this. Is speaking of animals and changing their behavior. So the other day, Brian was out filming, doing some stuff for me at the farm.
Uh-huh.
And it was hot, and we had zero wind whatsoever down in the woods. And I was trying to cut up a tree. My gas chainsaws would not run. So I had to use this little dinky 8-inch electric saw to cut up a tree that was 3 times the size of an 8-inch chainsaw. So I am sweating, dying, no wind. And the next thing I know is this animal changed his behavior when that drone got too close. But it was the best thing ever to get that close, because he dropped that drone right down over me and turned the blades up high. It was the best fan ever to cool me down in the woods. And I'm like, now that you could change this animal's behavior doing that, because that was awesome.
Didn't mind that, did you?
Nope, that was not too close. So Brian, I thank you for that, because that saved me pretty well out there in the woods. So, but that.
I should just clarify, just for the listeners, just because I don't want to get in trouble by anybody by any means, but I was not directly over Art. I was a little bit away from him, but obviously the drones give off quite a bit of air on those propellers. So I was over his shoulder, and he got a nice breeze out of it, because it was hot down in there. So.
And I had a helmet on for cutting wood anyway, so even if that's probably why I thought you were over me, but even if you would have been, I would have been safe. I've been hit in the head many times, so I'd have been all good. So
knock some sense into you.
But, so now explain, the couple drones you have and kind of what you'd like to get into. We kind of discussed that the other day, too, and where you'd like to go with it.
Yeah, so I have 3 different drones. The one I started out with initially when I first got into deer recovery was the DJI M30T. That one has just a static payload on it. And so that means I just can't change out the payload. I have that particular payload has thermal on it. It's got, a color camera, it's got a wide angle. It's got a zoom feature on it. And then it also has a laser rangefinder on it. So the laser rangefinder is what helps me. So if I find somebody's deer, and I can confirm that it's dead, because there is legalities around this too with the DNR, you have to make sure it's dead. Otherwise, you cannot provide the location to that animal. So when I find that animal and I can get a clear line of sight to it, I can pin it with the laser rangefinder. And what that does is it marks its GPS coordinate. And then I can take that GPS coordinate on my controller, and it populates a QR code, and then the hunter scans that QR code, and that GPS coordinate gets transferred onto their phone, Google Maps, whatever, and then essentially they can walk right to the deer using that. So that was the first drone that I started using, was just the DJI M30T. And then, as much as I hate to admit it, I ended up crashing that one my first season. So I had 5 recoveries lined up to do the next day, and I needed a drone. So I called around. Nobody really had anything. And then the closest place that did have one was over by Minneapolis. So I had to make about the 4-hour drive over there, and I got a different drone. I upgraded because I was looking at getting this one anyway. So this is the one that I use for LiDAR. This one gives me more flexibility. This one I can change out the payloads. I can put on, I got a thermal one for that too, which is kind of the exact same as the DJI M30, the M30T, which it has the thermal quality is better on that one. And then I can also run a spotlight side by side, and I can actually swivel both of them. Whereas the M30T, I do have a spotlight for it, but I can't swivel it. I can only turn it up and down, and that's it. So the that one's the DJI M350 RTK, which I ran that one basically all year last year. And most people are like, holy cow, that's a big drone. But obviously it's not as big as like an egg drone. So I got that one, and I do have like LiDAR for that one. I do have a multispectral payload for that, where I can do like crop health analysis. I did that last summer. And then the one that I had out with you, Art, doing some footage for you, that one is the Mavic 4 Pro, and that is just more of like a video photography type drone. It's got a higher megapixels, just better footage quality compared to those other drones. Those other drones are more for like, thermal inspections, really like data type projects, where that one that I had out with you, that is really for like footage, photos, when you're looking for that high quality cinematic type feel. So those are the 3 drones that I got. At some point I will maybe look at getting into the egg side of the business as well. But I'm just a busy summer right now. So I got in the mix of building a garage, baby on the way, working full time. So I'm limited on time this year. So hopefully next year, maybe I can put some more time into some additional avenues for the business and kind of see where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds pretty busy right there, just doing, all those things. And now with fall coming up, it's even going to get, busier, it sounds like, because, the big question I have, because you said you had, 125 recoveries last year?
Just over 150.
Over 150, okay. So, and I guess last week I'd pissed a couple people off so I might as well just say it now. Is that because, do you think people just don't have the tracking ability anymore, or that they're making bad shots? They're making, whether it's a compound, whether it's a crossbow, whatever, because of today's technology, they're making shots or trying to make shots that they shouldn't be making. And so
because I can always call a dog or a drone.
Right, because they can call a dog or a drone. Is that, do you think that you're getting more business that way, or is it just that people want to make sure that they're doing everything ethically to find that deer?
So I think there's multiple different angles to this. So when I first started, I wasn't charging as much as some of the drone operators. When I first started, I was doing $140 just to show up, and then a $60 finder's fee. Last year, I went away from the finder's fee because what I found out my first year is that too many people could not confirm for me if it was truly their deer that I found. So I was losing money because people couldn't confirm for me if it was their deer or not. So last year, I just went the $200 flat fee, and then plus there's some mileage added onto it if you're past 30 miles. So for me to get to the 150, I think my price point had a lot to do with it. The next closest guy that I know of, I think he got just over 120 calls. So I don't know if there's somebody else, in Wisconsin that got more than me. I'm not sure. But from what I know, I did the most. But again, I think price has a lot to do with that. And I think because of my price point, I think people are willing to just try and find the animal. I think they're trying to do the right things. That's part of the reason why I got into this is because, growing up, like the deer population, it was really good down here, right, in southwest Wisconsin. But then Ernebuck came along and it wiped out a lot of the population. So, when I said early on, like my focus kind of changed as I got older, and, that's kind of why. It's because the deer population, I seen it dwindling. So that's really why I got into the drone recovery aspect of it, is just try to help people actually find their animals to help the deer population. That was the biggest reason for it. But yeah, I think there's, I'm not saying people are taking bad shots, but a lot of times they just want confirmation. They just want to know, is that deer going to die? Is that deer going to live? I think that's really what it comes down to. Like I said, I think people are trying to do the right thing. But it's difficult to say because, there's a lot of guys out there that, they think they made a great shot, right? And this is probably the number one thing I always get told is like, you should see the amount of blood that I have. Well, for me and, for experienced hunters that know what really good blood means, you got a few things that will happen, right? You will get a jugular hit or an artery hit that will bleed really, really well. But the chances are you're going to find that deer within a reasonable distance, right? You're probably not calling a dog. You're probably not calling a drone. Mm-hmm. The second one, obviously, is a heart shot, but I have seen heart shots where they don't bleed either. So, but if you do heart shot one, they can bleed really well. But the one that I usually get called out for are muscle hit deer. Mm-hmm. That is the number one call that I usually get because they think that just because they have a lot of blood, the deer is going to die. And I don't think people understand that, deer don't need a lot of blood to live. So, and there's some hunters out there, are to your point, maybe they don't understand tracking. They haven't put in the time or effort to try to dissect, what muscle blood looks like versus what lung blood looks like, because some people will see muscle blood and they'll see a pin drop of air in it and they think it's lung, but that's not the case. Like for it to be lung, you need like that frothy blood, right? You got bubbles stacked on top of bubbles. That's what you're looking for. And I just don't think people have some of that tracking experience to know what to actually look for.
I think that's likely a big, chunk of it. I think too, people they see what they want to see, too, not everybody is really, in real time. You can't always tell where you hit the animal, and, animals move very quickly, string jumping, spinning, your arrow can hit a branch or a twig that you don't see. And in real time, those things are hard to see. We have the advantage of, because we're filming it, like we can play it back and slow it down and go frame by frame and stop at the point of impact. And then you can see, really where the animal was and what position it was in, where the leg was, things like that. And it can look entirely different in that photographic evidence than what you saw in real time. We've seen that time and time again.
Yeah, that's 100%. I did a recovery last year for a guy that he wasn't 100% sure if he hit it, but he had it on video. And once I got out there, I seen it, and I had him send it to me on my cell phone, because on the cell phone, at least on mine, you can open up the video and then you can click on it at the very bottom with just a small little icon, and then you can go frame by frame. really slow with it. And once I did that, I seen that his arrow hit a small little twig right in front of him that he couldn't see because it happened so fast. And it's one of those things where when you film it, it's really nice to be able to see that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, I had to tell him, I'm like, I don't think you actually hit this deer. You know, it's still alive. So, but yes, footage is always a good thing. Even if you don't have it on your bow or over your shoulder, whatever, but if you can get your phone out right away and like get that animal walking away, like sometimes we can tell from, you know, a tracker's perspective, like we can see different like body gestures. Like if their back end is kind of like hunched up, the chances are you probably gut shot it. You know, there's signs that we can look for to determine kind of where you might have hit it and everything like that. So even if, like I said, if you can't get the shot or over the shoulder, whatever, but if you can get the animal as it's, you know, maybe exiting the field, if it's not obviously running out of sight right away, but, you know, anything you can do to try to get footage of that animal, that's going to help us in the end.
Yeah. And maybe even trail cams, if you've got any trail cams on that, you know, where you were, you know,
Absolutely.
that would have got the, you know, would have got them running by or walking by.
Yeah. Now, how soon should they call you? Because how long does it take before those thermal images disappear? So if that deer goes off and dies, and he dies 200 yards away, you know, and he waits till the next day to call you, is that deer going to be too cold to get picked up by thermal, or how does that work?
So this is a great question, and one that I get often, especially when I'm out and about with other hunters. I try to educate people while I'm out there flying. So there is a season aspect to this. So if that happened early season, okay, and I'm talking like, you know, when it's still like 50 degrees, you know, you might even be able to get down to 40s if it's sunny out. So early season, I can find deer carcasses that have been dead for like 2 or 3 weeks. And the reason being is because when it's early out, it's so hot out, and when that sun, you'd be amazed what the sun will do. The sun will heat up anything and everything. It will heat up rocks, dead trees, and those carcasses will hold that heat from that sun. So I have found, not that the hunter called me 2 or 3 weeks later, but while I'm out there flying for a different deer, I run across those deer, and I'm always like, hey, did you guys know about this deer? And they're like, no, we didn't know anything about that one, but can you give us the coordinate to it? And I'm like, yeah, by all means, go get it, because it's already, you know, just decomposed. So early season, they will hold their temperature. That's not a problem. When you get into an issue is when, let's say you get towards like the end of October, early November, and you start getting those cold fronts and you get like rain and everything else kind of mixed in. When you get those cold spells, you know, below 32 degrees and you get a little bit of rain mixed in there, that's when those thermals can start to deplete quicker. But they will still hold their body temperature. I mean, the one that I found my first year, I found him. He was still standing. He was shot in his rear end. And I went back out there exactly 24 hours later to check on him, and he lost his thermals completely. And the only reason I found him was I flew right back to that spot to see if he was there. He wasn't. And then there was 2 heat signatures in that area. And I zoomed in on them. They were both does, but the second doe that I looked at, I happened to see the guy's fletching sticking up in my on my camera. And then I zoomed down, and there his buck was. She was hovering over top of him. So in that case, that deer lost his thermals 24 hours later. It was kind of cold at that point, but so it varies. There's, like I said, there's weather dependencies on some of this stuff. If anytime you can get sun, the sun will definitely help that deer hold heat longer.
Interesting. So
yeah,
here's the you bring up that those does were hovering over that. How many animals have you found due to predators being on that animal. Late season when you've lost that thermal, bobcats, coyotes, bears, wolves, anything like that is, eating on that.
Yeah, does that happen?
Does that happen?
The first year, I don't think we ran into that issue. Last year, we were on a streak. I think we had back-to-back calls where bobcats beat us to the deer. The one, I think, was kind of up by you guys. But anyways, I got out there and I found the deer, and I looked at his back end. I seen that he had some chew marks on him, and then I seen there was a heat signature there, and I scanned over there just to take a look to see what they were, and sure enough, there was a bobcat with 2 kits sitting there right on a log. I was like, wow, that's pretty crazy. That was the first bobcat one that we come across, and then the other one was in between where I'm at and you guys. I kind of told you about this one, Art, but as soon as I got out there, I found the deer right away, but there was a bobcat, and I got this one posted on my Facebook too, but you guys can see like the bobcat is going to town on that deer, really going towards the back legs to get on that deer. And on that one, I flew low to try to scare that bobcat off, but he was not having it. He was fixed on that deer. So, and then there was a couple coyote ones last year too. This one guy, I felt terrible for him. He's truly a meat eater, and it wasn't even that long after the shot because he shot it in the evening, and I got out there I think 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning, and I found it, and at first I saw a coyote in the area. I'm like, oh, this probably isn't good. And then I found a heat signature, and then I found his deer, and that thing was already down to bones. There was nothing left on that deer at all. It was just gone.
That's
and then
crazy.
there was one other one where the gentleman called in the dog. The dog tracked it up to this creek, but they went on the other side of the creek, and the dog couldn't pick up the blood trail anymore. So he called me out, and I was flying, and I was working my way down the creek, and I happened to see a coyote over on the one side, and I was following him for a little bit to see if he would take me to the deer. And I just kind of gave up on it because he was getting kind of far away from where I thought the deer would have been. So then I circled back, kind of coming back to us, scanning this hillside, and sure enough, that's where the guy's buck was at, on the hillside. He didn't go up the hill very far because typically once they're at the bottom, and they usually can't get back up the hill. So, yeah, that was I think those were the 4 that we ran across last year where predators got to them, but no bears, no wolves, no mountain lions yet. So.
Well, that's good. Keep them, north or west or wherever. We don't need those in Southwest Wisconsin. I know they've been there, and go through, but keep them away. We're a lot better that way. But
Agreed.
The other thing, and I'm not sure if you do this, as part of your, services or not, but. I saw here not too long ago where there was, some lost family pets, and there was a pet that was lost, and so they'd called a thermal drone in, and they got that drone in, they found the dog. Well, on that dog, there was also, and it was a little yappy, ankle biter, and and they found it, and it was kind of, backed into a corner. Well, not far from that, there was coyotes, and they had this dog, bayed, and they're probably, if the drone wouldn't have been there, I'm assuming they probably would have killed it, because that poor little pup didn't stand a chance. And they actually, got the drone, flew down towards the dog. It actually scared them all, but the drone operator, followed the dog and, got the owner in on top of that. And so do you offer those too to find, lost pets, livestock, people? I mean, I hate to say that, but, kids wander off into the woods at parks or
maybe the police are using those, I suppose.
So there's, different things. Do you offer that service to the local, fire departments, police departments, things like that, to help them if they need help with that drone work?
Yeah, if they need help, yes, we're always willing to help where we can, for sure. The big thing right now is a lot of the departments, they have their own drones already. So you kind of have to know somebody to even get in, and sometimes they still don't even like working with independents.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we have done definitely dog calls. We've done cattle. Actually, I might be going out to a cattle one tonight. I guess a heifer got out, so might be going to look for one tonight or tomorrow morning, depending on when they get back to me. So, but yeah, we offer that service. We also offer wildlife herd assessments. So if you guys are curious on where deer are maybe bedding at certain times of the year, I don't usually offer this service during hunting season. Obviously, there's legalities behind it. So I really offer that after season and then before season. So, but that's usually pretty eye-opening for a lot of people, especially during the wintertime, because during, obviously, the rut or early season, they might have, enough food to get that deer by. But once that wintertime comes, man, a lot of people lose their deer on their property because they will transition somewhere else. So but we've learned a lot, in the 2 years doing this. I mean, I got a bunch of data that I've been racking up too. I'm always curious in like the weather aspect, how it impacts like deer movement and stuff, and how many recoveries I've done during, certain moon phases and during certain pressures and stuff like that. So I got some of that data too, if you guys want to chew through some of that.
That all seems really interesting.
Yeah.
Brian, you mentioned, briefly, we've talked a lot about different regulations and laws. You mentioned briefly with regard to deer recovery that you can only provide coordinates if you can verify that the animal is dead. What other regulations exist in Wisconsin as it relates to what you can and can't do, or the hunter can or can't do in regard with drone recoveries?
Yeah, so the biggest one is just that.
Okay.
So the DNR says that we cannot provide a location of a live or a crippled animal. We can only provide the location of a dead animal. That is the biggest one. And then there's some there's some folks out there that have differing opinions on this. I've talked with the director of, he's a DNR policymaker, about this. He gave us the okay to do it, but using a spotlight on a drone at night, right? Because we fly majority of our stuff at night because the thermals are better, obviously during that time when the sun's down. So there's, some people that are like, hey, you can't be shining, at this time. Well, DNR policymaker gave us the okay to use our spotlights, but only when we find an animal that we need to check. If we're not looking at an animal, the spotlight needs to be turned off, move to the next one, find it, turn it on, look at it, turn it off, move to the next. So those are really the biggest one. And then obviously, like we've already touched base, on like the state parks, you can't really launch from a state park or anything. You can fly over it, launch from somewhere else and fly over, but you can't launch from the state parks. And even public land, you can't launch from public land.
Okay. What about carrying a weapon? Like, is the hunter like standing next to you as you're controlling and inside of the drone, and can the hunter have a weapon on them?
So I have a waiver that I use with all the hunters, and I'm sure you probably maybe talked with some of the hunters that I've done recoveries for, but I always make the hunters aware I don't want to see any weapons on site while I'm flying the drone. And obviously there are rules, you can't hunt with an aircraft, right? And a drone is considered an aircraft. So I always ask people, no weapons on scene. I usually don't even allow people to be dressed in like camo because if a warden happened to show up, I don't want them even thinking that we're intending to hunt with a drone, because that is not the case. And I think that's where a lot of people are kind of up in arms with the whole drone stuff. It's like, well, you're hunting with a drone. It's like, well, no, we're not hunting with a drone. The hunt has already occurred. We're past the hunt portion now.
Mm-hmm.
We're now on to recovery. So I just don't think a lot of people can separate those two things.
Right. And I think, like you said, even the clothing helps, like just removing things that are part of an act of hunting. It's like, I remember having a conversation with wardens, about, hunting hours and, whether you're staying in the stand, like after hunting hours, because you're surrounded by deer and you don't want to get down and spook them all, or you've got a long, a decent walk out of the woods, back to the vehicle or whatever. And, what's going to distinguish your, late departure from the stand from, hunting after hours. And they said it's like things like taking your, like if you're bow hunting, like taking your release off, doing, different things that would signify that you're no longer in the act of hunting. And so like you said, if you kind of like the clothing is just one extra thing, right? To make it separate from hunting.
Yep, exactly. And I don't think a lot of people know this either, because this was something that I just found out I think when I first started doing the drone stuff, is because the whole spotlighting thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Technically, when you're walking into the woods, I was told this by the DNR policymaker, is when you're walking into the woods, your headlamp cannot be shining the landscape. Your headlamp is supposed to be pointing at the ground at all times. Otherwise, if a warden's seeing that your headlamp is up and scanning the horizon or whatever, they can nail you for hunting with a spotlight.
Well, I've sure learned a lot. It sounds like there's just a lot more to it than I ever, thought there was, and it's all, super interesting. How can people reach you or find you if they need to hire you for some drone services?
Yeah, I mean, they can reach out to me on Facebook, any social media platform we are on. So Facebook, Instagram, those are the two main ones that we really push content on. We are on X as well. We don't do a ton on there. Just, our viewership really comes from, Facebook and Instagram. So, and usually I'm posting content on there, during hunting season. When I'm slow and I do a recovery, early season, I will try to do like maybe some long format type videos. If I get the ability to do some editing. Otherwise, when it starts ramping up, towards the end of October, then I usually go to the short format stuff and really just try to crank out as many videos as I can, because when you're doing 150, it's hard to get to all of them. And there's some content on there, some people are going to love. There's going to be other content on there that some people are really going to hate. It's a mixed bag. So I can't please everybody, but I hope everybody at least enjoys the content and learns stuff, kind of from what we're doing. So.
And those social media pages do you run them under the Rugged Altitude?
Yep, they're all under Rugged Altitude. There's I got a website out there as well, so that's www.ruggedaltitude.com. There's some good information on there if you guys are interested in my prices and stuff like that. That's all underneath there, so feel free to check that out.
Awesome. Well, there you go. Thanks for joining us today, Brian. We appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Yeah. And if you find yourself in need of some drone services, find Brian at Rugged Altitude and Own the Season.
Follow Own the Season Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks for listening.
Check back weekly for new episodes.